A 1, a 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can be serious or silly when you paint with Robin and Lily. Mama's a teacher, I just write songs. Come and join along.
Hi, I'm Robin.
And I'm Lily.
And we are
Robin and Lily.
For the Love of Painting. Welcome, we're glad you're joining us.
First, before we begin, if you are joining us for the very first time, we have accompanying paint kits that go along with these free watercolor lessons. And if you're interested in purchasing a kit that comes with everything you need to paint this lesson here in front of us, then visit artbarnstudios.com and the link will be in the description below. If not, then compile all of the fancy goodies we see here. We're going to need some paint, paper, a pencil, a watercolor brush, and 2 glasses of water. We're going to go ahead and jump into finishing the starter lines that we have from our paint kits here. And so if you don't have a paint kit, go ahead and draw as far as we have here on your paper.
It's pretty much a contour drawing of the old-fashioned pickup truck. Some very simple lines. So if you're working without the kit, take your time, sketch freely, some really simple lines to get your truck on the paper. And I've drawn 3 little circles here, which will eventually represent the bulk of our bouquet as we have filled up the back of our pickup truck with some beautiful May flowers.
Wonderful. Please excuse the occasional dog you might hear in the background, or chicken. We do live on a farm.
That's
so
right.
It goes.
Okay, usually we start by finishing our line drawing from the starter lines on our watercolor paper. Today we're going to start a little differently. I want to do an example of our flowers for you because the flowers we're painting are very small. So I wanted you to see that a little bit bigger, and I want you to notice how playful they are. So these are simple flowers, really fun to paint and kind of messy, which actually this entire painting is going to be really loose, a little bit messy. We are not going to stay in the lines. We're going to go outside of the lines, and this entire painting is going to be painted wet on wet, which means our paper will be wet. We'll lay down pure water on certain areas that we're working, and then we paint into that water, or we drop little bits of color into that water and let it bleed and move. And it's so much fun to paint in this wet on wet style. And we've even got a little bit of splatter going on. So if you just really want to have fun.
Technique in any of our paintings, and I am very excited to use it. I don't actually think I've ever used a splatter technique in watercolor.
It takes a little bit of courage.
Yeah,
it comes at the end, and you have to kind of have a little bit of courage to splatter your painting, but also fun.
Yeah,
just fun. Let's get started with our beautiful little flower. So I have made for Lily and I just a little example that simply has a circle. Now these circles, much like most of the lines in our drawing, will disappear into the paint once we start painting, but this gives us a guide and a place to start. Let me remind you, for this whole painting, we're not going to try and paint within the lines. The lines are not there for that purpose. It's not to contain our color in our paint. It's just to give us a starting point. And because we're painting very loosely this time, we want to go outside of the lines, let that water and that pigment bleed and move, and we're going to make this really playful today.
Awesome.
Okay, so we're going to start with, well, why don't you use the 2 colors on your example?
Okay.
This is cerulean blue and alizarin crimson. And for my yellow and orange, this is cadmium yellow and also a little bit of alizarin crimson. So, and that's what we have on our palette. Cerulean blue, Payne's gray, which is like a black, alizarin crimson, and cadmium yellow. Awesome. So wet on wet means the first thing you do is you lay down pure, clean water. Now, again, I'm not going to stay in the lines. I'm going to paint this circle, but I'm going to go outside of the lines.
And remember, one of our glasses of water is just to stay clean. We need that clean water for this wet on wet effect. The other one we're going to use when we switch out colors and we really need to rinse the brush thoroughly. Okay.
Okay, so I have painted with just plain clean water my circle, including outside of the line a little bit. I'm going to start with a bold cadmium yellow. I'm going to add water to my palette. If you order a kit, you will get everything you see here, including this exact palette. So each palette in each kit is specifically for that painting. So it's going to have the colors you need.
Do I start with the alizarin crimson?
Well, you could go either way. On that example, I did start with the alizarin crimson.
I'm going to try the other way around just for fun.
Okay.
Let's see what that does.
So I'm going to take my really bold cadmium yellow and I'm going to follow my circle, but also kind of spiral inward and then let that moist paint on the wet paper just kind of do its own thing. Try and leave a little bit of white. Leaving some white, and you can see in my example where there's some white paper shines through. Gives it more contrast, a little bit of highlight and sparkle. Now I'm going to use my second jar to rinse my brush really clean because I'm getting rid of all the color to pick up a brand new color. This time I'm going to go into the alizarin crimson. And of course, when our alizarin, a little bit of a reddish pinkish color mixes with our yellow, we're going to get some orange. Again, I'm going to paint over my line and then swirl in.
This alizarin crimson is one of my all-time favorite colors.
Me too.
I'm going to start from the center and swirl out.
Oh, that's a good idea. Beautiful. And don't be afraid to actually go outside of even your little puddle of water, like that. So now I'm going to drop just a few little droplets and let that move around within the water. And you can see how quickly it begins to look like a loosely painted flower. Oh, beautiful. Look what these colors do when they mix together. Love it. All right. Okay. Can you see that they are quite different? They almost look the same, but they're actually quite different. Never will any two of our flowers be the same, especially when each of us does our own style. So let it flow, let it bleed, let it begin to dry, and we'll just put these up here, and they're gorgeous. So I can't wait to do those smaller versions on our truck. Okay, we ready to get started?
Yep.
All right, now it's time to finish our line drawing. We have starter lines. So we're going to go ahead and grab your pencil. Now, you can see there's a door that's drawn here. Let's draw that little window. Don't worry about perfection in any way. Most of these lines are going to disappear once we start painting, and the painting's going to be very loose. So don't fret over getting lines that are perfect. Just sketch in that little window. After you've drawn your window, let's draw the tires. Now the upper curve of this fender, are those fenders?
Don't ask me.
I think those are fenders. The upper curve of that fender is really the upper part of the tire. So if you're worried about drawing a really good circle, start with that upper half and just kind of finish it out as you go along the bottom. And again, we're not looking for perfection here. We don't need circles like you've traced a bottle cap or something. Just sketch it softly and as close to that circle shape as you can get. Inside that, we're going to do a smaller circle in the very center. Just kind of look at your outer line, and then when you draw that inner circle, it's a little bit easier to get your proportions correct if you just kind of look at the bigger circle as well. Okay, there is a third line, and it's kind of, I guess, the outer part of the wheel. And none of my circles are perfect, so I hope yours aren't either.
Mine are far from perfect.
Okay. We have our window. We have our wheels. We need a little headlight here on the front end. So you can see it here, just a little curve for a headlight. We're going to finish off the back bumper and the front bumper. Now, if you look at our example, you can see that we've drawn most of the lines for the truck, except for the bed. We're not going to draw a line for that bed because our flowers are overflowing and you're really not going to see the edge of the bed of the truck. So we're just going to leave that blank for now. All right, I think we have our drawing.
Excellent. What's next?
We're going to paint with cerulean blue the entire truck, just one light layer. We'll come back and add more layers of cerulean blue as each layer dries. That's called glazing in watercolor technique. But first, because it's wet on wet, we're going to paint with water. Make sure you really rinse your brush this time. Now, along where my flowers are going to be, I'm going to leave a messy edge to that water. There's no line to follow. For the rest of the truck, I'm going to generally follow my lines, but again, I'm going to go outside the lines a little bit because I want this to be loose and a little bit messy. Don't paint your tires. This is just the color of the truck, or where the color will be.
What about your door handle?
Good point. Don't paint the door handle.
I just did, but I'll let that dry.
Oh, you painted it with water, dab it with a paper towel. Don't paint the window. In fact, there are really 4 areas on this painting that will remain pure white paper. 1 is the window, 2 would be the handle, and then 3 and 4 are the inner circles of each tire. We're really going to leave that white paper. Sometimes I lean to the side and kind of look at my painting from an angle, and you can really see better. I bet I'm not even in the picture when I'm over here. You can really see better as the light reflects, and you can kind of see where the wetness is or where your paper is still dry. Okay, so wet on wet is so much fun. We're just going to take some clean water and we're going to wet that cerulean blue on our palette. We don't need a lot of it because the first layer that we're putting down on our truck is going to be really light. The more water you add, the lighter the color. And then just start dripping it in, moving it around. Have fun with how you lay this pigment down. You can let it dance and flow. We're not looking for a consistent smooth color. We're looking for a playful, a bit of swirl and movement in our color. Lily's using her paper towel almost like an eraser you can pick up quite a bit of pigment and sometimes even bring your paper back to white by dabbing it with a paper towel if it's still really, really wet. Don't be afraid to leave some white as you're painting in your truck as well. As the color settles and absorbs into the paper, it moves a lot and it'll fill in a lot of those areas that you leave as white, but we do want to try and leave some reflection. On the upper part of the two fenders, you're going to have a lighter reflecting area, and also on the top of the hood where the sunlight is probably bouncing off and reflecting. So that way you can think a little bit of where you might want to leave a lighter blue or even some white paper showing through wherever there might be reflections. I'm going back and purposefully going out of the lines. And just for fun, as a little bit of a shadow, I'm going to take some of this cerulean blue and paint below my truck like this. Really loose. Just let it be a little bit of a shadow. Add more water. You know, just kind of let that flow. I like that. Oh, beautiful. All right. Yours is messier than mine. I need to go back and make mine a little bit more messy. She's always ahead of me in messy.
This is my kind of painting, okay? She says, make sure you're outside of the lines. I say, no problem. That's exactly what I do.
And I have a really hard time going outside of the lines. But I'm trying.
You're doing well. I mean, this one's beautiful. You did that.
I did the example, and look, I'm outside of the lines for sure on that one.
It's true. So I believe this concludes step 2. We finished the drawing and we've put our first coat of blue down.
I love it.
Me too.
We're going to pause and let these dry. You can pause the video. One of the great things about joining a class that's a video class is that you can pause and stop and start as many times as you need. Go back, rewind, or just pause while your painting dries. Just like us, we need this color to be completely dry so that when we go in with new colors, we're not blending those colors in terms of them bleeding together. Now we will layer colors. That's glazing, but again, needs to be dry.
All right, so we'll come back in just a snap.
Hi, welcome back. We used a blow dryer to dry our small paintings. You might want to try that at home, or if you're patient, you just want to take a break and let it dry naturally, that's fine too. Look at our blue. I love how messy it is.
Me too.
We did it.
This is so much fun.
We didn't stay in the lines. It's awesome. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is a little Payne's gray or black. We're going to paint our tires. I want you to start painting from the outer edge of the tire, and we're going to let that pigment bleed inward. Again, wet on wet. So what do we start with?
Rinsing or clean water?
Clean water. Yeah, probably rinsing.
I was like,
She's
now I want to rinse.
We're going to rinse our paint. We're going to rinse our brushes. They have to be really clean. Okay, plain water. You're going to paint the tire, but not the smallest inner circle. We're going to leave that dry. All right, once you've laid down your water, we're going to take a little more clean water and loosen up some of our Payne's gray on our palette. We're going to paint the outer edge of our tire and let this Payne's gray bleed inward. So I'm going to start on the outside edge of my circle. And you can see as soon as I let go of my brush, it moves. The paint, the pigment begins to move. Just like that. Let it be messy. Let's talk about light for just a minute. In this painting, we don't have a whole lot of shadow and highlight, but just enough to let us know that the light is coming from above. So we are going to lay down some shadow on the bottom of things, like, for example, underneath the fenders, the tires are going to be the darkest and the blackest. Now at the moment that might not happen because our paints are still wet on the paper. When we come back later and put another layer, we'll focus on a lot of the darkest part of the tire being at the top right under that fender. That fender's creating a shadow. Also, take a tiny bit of your Payne's gray and draw a line under the door handle. Again, a little shadow. It can be messy. We're not trying to be too neat here. I think that's it for our Payne's gray for a minute. Let's rinse our brushes. All right, so let's get started with these beautiful, loose, fun flowers. We practiced a little larger. We're going to do exactly the same thing on each of our 3 circles. You can mix up any colors that you like. So let's remember, red and yellow are going to give you an orange, or our alizarin crimson and our cadmium yellow, a little bit of an orange. This alizarin crimson with our cerulean blue is going to give you a light purple. So any combination of those except for all 3. If you mix all 3, you get brown. Your primary colors, yellow, blue, and red, if you mix those together in any combination, you're going to get a muddy brown. So don't do that. All right, I'm going to go with, I think I'm going to do one of mine in this orange tone, one in this purpley tone, and one in a pure cerulean blue to kind of balance that truck. But you can do any colors you like. Wet on wet. So start with that wet circle, even outside of the line, and just have fun.
I already did it wrong. This is not wet on wet.
Oh, you were getting ready to paint with a wet brush
on dry paper. That's wet on dry. So I'm going to rinse that brush and try again. Wet on wet. Clean water on the paper, then the color.
Wet on dry is a perfectly good technique. You just get different effects. Mm-hmm. So try both. Practice with both.
Not much like a flower, but that's okay.
It's beautiful.
It's going to be whimsical, okay? It's going to be whimsical, guys. Don't expect these to look exactly like flowers. That's not quite the point we're going for here.
It's almost abstract.
That's right.
Also a little bit impressionistic. So the Impressionists, they were really painting the impression of color and light. Not at all trying to paint something that's realistic or even detailed, but instead letting all of the colors, often representing light and reflection, sort of putting those colors down in either dots or blobs or splashes, where it's an impression more than a specific realistic image. It's harder to leave the white on the tiny little flowers. Yes, it is. You can already see how my glass that I'm rinsing my brush in is really changing color. And if we didn't have that clean second glass, we wouldn't be able to work with that pure clean water in our wet on wet technique. I like what just happened here. I accidentally touched my red flower with my blue paint and it sucked that red right up over into the new flower. It's not what I intended, but that is exactly what we're looking for in terms of a loose watercolor style, and it's beautiful.
Now I really love what this is giving me in terms of a foundation for the flowers I want, but I think I actually want to let those dry a little bit before I come back with a little more detail. Is that the plan?
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking exactly the same thing. I really love what's happening with the colors. They're really alive. They're doing their own thing. But we need to stop. We need to not touch it. And that's a really hard thing to do when you're painting. It requires self-control. So I agree. I'm going to stop and let those flowers dry. And then we can always go back with a little bit more glazing or detail. So while we're letting our beautiful flowers dry, we're going to start painting in some of these darker blue lines. Just tracing those pencil lines, but again, messy. Don't try and be perfect about it. Also, we're going to lay in a little bit of shadow, the darker blue. Here where our flowers will be casting shadows down onto the truck, that's going to be darker. Around the upper part of the fender, leave the fender lighter, but just above that a little bit of shadow for that contrast. So yeah, let's just start painting in some of our darker blues. If your paper begins to dry, don't hesitate to just dip your brush in that clean water and add a little bit more clean water. And again, that'll begin to move the pigments around, just like adding more pigment. These are looking beautiful. Lily and I are going to outline our windows with that dark blue. We both noticed we hadn't done that. So let's do that first. A little bit of cerulean blue, and we're going to outline our window, much like we've already done with all the other edges and lines. And then a tiny little trick. We're going to make the glass look like it has a bit of a reflection with a really, really light cerulean blue on our brush and 2 or 3 little swishes. Let's call those swishes. That kind of gives us a look of a reflection. We're going to add a little bit more detail to our black tires. Again, making sure it's dark under the fender and dark around the bottom edge, but we do want to continue working wet on wet. So let's lay down a little bit of water and then another layer of our Payne's gray. While our tires are drying, we're going to move up to this area where we're going to begin creating that bouquet. All the greenery, the stems, the leaves, and a few more flowers and some of that splatter effect. The first thing we're going to lay down is quite a bit of yellow. It's going to be in the background. Later, we're going to add a little bit of blue on top of that to create some green. But let's start with lots of yellow. Wet on wet, so we're going to do. This is really fun because it can be super messy. Plain water just all over the place, but not on top of your flowers. So up to the edge of your flowers, but otherwise be kind of messy with how you splatter on that water. Go a little bit larger even than the area where you think you might create the flowers and the leaves. And then when you're ready, load your brush with pure cadmium yellow, which is a gorgeous summer color. You can already see where that yellow begins to fall on top of the truck. It's creating green just naturally, which works for us because those are going to be some green leaves and stems. If you look closely at our example, there are a few more flowers in there, but they're kind of hidden within just the splatter and the messiness of the pigment. I did have an orange flower here, and actually I started with a yellow flower here, but it kind of just turned into part of the bouquet. You can add additional flowers, additional colors, really anything that you choose. I'm going to go ahead and do a little swirl for this orange flower right here, sort of behind my first 3 flowers. That's going to be
wet?
Yes, the yellow that's there is already wet, so I'm going to use a little bit of alizarin crimson to give me that orange, and I'm just going to swirl that around to make a couple more little flowers that are in the background. I was so tempted, I'm starting to work into those other flowers as well. A little bit of crisp line. This is really the one area where I would say we are working wet on dry. I'm not going to wet these 3 original flowers again. We let those dry for a reason. We're going to add a few details, some crisp lines that represent the petals as they twirl around. Nothing specific, little dots, little lines. It all becomes a beautiful bouquet in the end. Remember, when you're working on the details of these tiny little flowers, kind of follow this example. It's harder to do it tiny, but just do your best. It's going to be messy. That's part of the style of what we're doing today. Ooh, and I love that. That turned out beautiful.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
It's funny because when I'm concentrating, I don't look up and look at lilies for a minute, and then I do, and I'm like, oh, they're both beautiful. Okay.
It's really fun to see how often we make really similar choices, and then how often our choices are far from similar.
Yeah, that's true. I love what we have there.
That's the fun of this process of watercolor painting.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is so unique.
Okay. Now that we have our truck painted, most of the detail, the darker line, the shadow, we've got our beautiful flowers, we're going to go ahead and work into this wet yellow with some blue. That's going to give us green, but we want to be really careful not to touch our wet flowers.
Okay.
So just a little bit of blue. If you want to mix green on your palette, you can. Or you can paint right into the yellow with your blue, and it's still going to give you green. A beautiful spring green. So when you're painting out...
Wet on wet. Every time. Gets me every time.
You can see that there's nothing specific about the way I painted these leaves and branches and stems. It's pretty messy. Again, impressionistic. You're just giving the impression of leaves and stems. Have fun with it. I noticed immediately that my yellow had started to dry. So when I added a little blue, there lays the blue right on top. I need to add some more yellow or some more water to get that green. Remember, at the very bottom of your bouquet, as it's overflowing out of that pickup truck, that's where you're going to create some shadow, some deeper blue just underneath that green. actually liking this one better than my original example. Maybe it's because I've had practice, but I like this one a lot. Ooh, gorgeous. You had a lot more green up top. I need to do that. Beautiful.
I love it, but I'm at a place where I need to stop. If I keep messing with it, I'm just gonna make it muddy.
That's a really hard thing to learn to do. Stop when you need to stop. Sometimes you just want to keep going. I do want to add a tiny bit of detail to this flower.
I really meant my green.
And a tiny little detail to this flower. Now the reason I'm getting a crisp edge is because this is a wet brush on a dry flower. So most of this is wet on wet, but in a few places we're adding detail or we're painting with a wet brush on a dry area. I really love what that did though. It gave me a lot more crisp definition within that bouquet. I love it. They're beautiful. You can keep adding dark greens, light greens, more yellow, more water. Kind of paint until you feel like you're finished. I think paintings are often about how we feel, don't you?
Absolutely. This one makes me pretty happy, but I think this last part's gonna make me the happiest.
Oh, the splatter part?
Yes.
We're getting really close to the splatter part. Does that make you nervous? It makes me nervous.
It makes me excited.
Okay, you be excited, I'll be nervous.
Okay, you let us know how you feel about the splatter.
Okay, so we're gonna practice splatter on the back of our flowers. So let's do that. So pick your color that you think you might want to splatter. You can see here I splattered a little cerulean blue and a little alizarin crimson. And even over here, there's splatter all the way over here, but it's very faint. So again, you can add a ton of splatter or just a little bit. But let's practice on our cards. So rinse your brush until it's clean. Choose your color, but make sure it's nice and wet on the palette. I'm going to start with my alizarin crimson, so I'm going to add more water. Get my brush really loaded. Get ready to get messy because you're going to take your thumb. I'm going to do it like this so you guys can see. You're going to take your thumb and literally, can you guys see that?
Yeah. Show the top camera too.
Okay, from the top camera. I'm going to use a different color for the top camera. I'm going to get in here and get some of this blue. Just be careful not to splatter on your other paintings.
Oh
gosh. Okay, I'm just going to do it for the...
Okay.
That's gorgeous. Having trouble?
That's my abstract right there.
Okay. All right, I'll lay mine here.
I think I'm going to use a different finger. I guess use...
Oh, yeah.
Use whatever feels comfortable to
Oh,
you.
I didn't try it. Here, I'm going to try my...
working as well.
I'm going to try my pointy finger. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Okay. So practice. You can splatter any way you choose. Here's my splatter example. And now I'm going to be really brave. I'm just going to jump right in. I'm just going to splatter.
Hey.
It's so,
yeah.
it's so nerve-wracking. Oh, you did it. Yay. You're doing a different finger. Okay.
I don't know if that works. That's probably not the...
What, doing like that?
The technical way to do it.
I don't think there's a technical way to splatter. I'm pretty sure it's just splatter.
That's probably true.
Any way you want. Don't forget to come over.
Actually, this works pretty well, especially if you want a little bit larger.
Yeah, you got some large splatters there. What did you do? Oh, like this. Like a tap, tap.
Tap, tap, tap.
All right, I'm going to try that. Oh, no, I'm not tapping very well. It's not working for me.
It's okay.
Okay. There it goes. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love it.
I like that better than that one.
Really?
Oh, yes, yes.
Please share with us your paintings. We want to know how you have learned
Woo!
to splatter.
Look at my splatter. That's awesome. I love it. I like this one so much better than that one, but the splatter is bolder, and that's because she gave me the confidence to be bold. Like, oh, I love it. Are you having fun?
Yeah, I'm having fun. Look at that. Come on.
If you guys are having fun, let us know. That would make us happy too.
That's so true.
Ooh. Ooh.
Oh, I probably should stop. Should you though?
I don't know. It's so hard to stop.
Okay, I'm done. That was it. That was my last one.
Me too.
Hands up. Gotta stop at some point.
All right, brushes down.
That was a blast.
All right.
Look at that.
That was so much fun.
That's
Oh my goodness. We did great. High five. Woo! All right. We hope that you enjoyed this painting as much as we did, and we really want to see your examples. If you send us your examples and give us permission, we're going to share these on our Instagram and on
Absolutely.
our Facebook.
Yep.
And where else?
No, that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Facebook and Instagram, find us at Art Barn Studios, and our website, artbarnstudios.com. That will give you an inside look into all of our business details, the business of our studio in the barn, our painting studio, and our wood studio as well, a whole other facet of our business. So check it out, and thank you for joining us.
These are great. Have fun. Bye,
Bye.
guys.